Welcome to the program, Senator Ted Cruz. How are you, sir?
I'm doing terrific, Glenn. How are you doing?
Very good. You're 4 weeks away from the Iowa caucus. Have you any information on the polling numbers?
Well, the polling we have is what's public, and it continues to look very good for us. What we're seeing here in Iowa and nationally is that we're seeing conservatives uniting behind our campaign. You know, as you know, when we launched the campaign, that was the strategy from day one, is to coalesce the old Reagan coalition, and that is happening more and more every day. I'm very, very encouraged.
You are still leading the polls in Iowa that we have seen, but there hadn't been any Iowa polls in the last couple of weeks, but we are anxiously awaiting the latest. Let's get into some of the things that are happening this week. Let me start with the Oregon story. There is an armed standoff in Oregon. It is about a couple of ranchers with the Hammonds. I don't know if you're up on the case, but it appears to be almost like double jeopardy. Does the government have a right to come back after you've served your sentence and say, hey, by the way, we've changed our mind, you need to serve more time?
Well, I don't know the specific facts of the Hammonds case. You know, all of us are familiar with instances of government overreaching, and the BLM does not have a good record in that regard. But that being said, it is not a good development to see protesters taking a protest and threatening violence. And under the First Amendment, we have a right to speak out. We have a right to petition for redress of our grievances. But we don't have a right to commit violence against other Americans or to threaten imminent violence.
They would say that they haven't done that. And in fact, a lot of people have been calling me today, Ted, and a lot of people, if you read my Facebook page, because I'm coming out, you know, you got to follow the peaceful attributes of Martin Luther King, not Malcolm X. And people are saying this is 1776. I mean, we wouldn't have been a free country had we not picked up arms.
Look, there is no doubt the Second Amendment was adopted in part to preserve the right to revolution. But we're not at a point now where violence is justified. And I'll tell you, my prayers are, number one, for a peaceful resolution to this standoff, and number two, for the families of law enforcement. I don't want to see any police officers or law enforcement who are risking their lives risk being victims of violence. I understand frustration with government, as do you, and we have avenues to seek the peaceful overthrow of the government. It's called an election. We're going to have it in less than a year. And that's the proper avenue. It's what you and I are working very, very hard to do, is to energize the people to use the powers we have as Americans to change this government. And I believe that's going to happen 1 year from today.
I know you don't have the specifics of the case, but one last question on this. I just can't get past the fact that the government can come in and add to your sentence after you've already served your sentence. Does that seem, just on the face of it, right or legal?
I'll confess, I don't know the specifics of what occurred there, so I don't want to comment, Glenn. Obviously, having spent a lot of years in law enforcement myself, without knowing the specifics, I know these two individuals were charged with arson, which is a serious crime. And I don't know the facts of whether they committed the arson or not, but that's why we have a criminal justice system. And
have you ever seen anybody, the government or anybody, ever have their sentence after they've served their time? Have you ever seen that happen before?
Well, there are certainly enhancements while you're serving. I don't know the specifics of the enhancement, so I don't want to answer without knowing the facts.
Okay, so let me go next to the president and his new idea on guns that range anywhere from making sure that the government can take their own sweet time on background checks to now circumventing HIPAA, it seems. If there's somebody in your family that has some sort of mental disorder or whatever, that the doctors now have to alert the government that those guns might be in dangerous proximity.
Well, I'm sorry to say no one is surprised by this latest action by President Obama. He has spent 7 years abusing his constitutional authority, abusing his executive power, and this has been the most anti-gun, most anti-Second Amendment administration in history. We have a president who has done everything he could to restrict our right to keep and bear arms. The previous Attorney General, Eric Holder, said he believed his job was to brainwash Americans against guns. And I fully expect when we see all the details of what he does that this will be yet another abuse of power. But there is a silver lining, Glenn. President Obama has used executive power over and over again to abuse his authority, and everything done with executive power can be undone with executive power. And I have pledged on the very first day of my presidency to rescind every single illegal and unconstitutional executive action by Barack Obama.
So that led me to this question earlier today, because I made that point that I can't guess I think Hillary Clinton would leave them in. I can't guess what Donald Trump has done because he has been on both sides of the issues on gun control. However, I am very clear on what you would do. So that led me to the question, if Barack Obama knows that he only has, 11 months left, and unless it's Hillary Clinton coming in, why would he do this? Because he knows that if it's a Republican, it's going to be undone.
Well, I think he is betting on two things. Number one, I think it is in his nature to abuse his power right up until the very minute he leaves the Oval Office. I think this is a man who believes in government power, and I think he has a mission. He's a true believer. The violation of our Bill of Rights for the last 7 years has been concerted, it has been organized, and it will continue, sadly, right up until noon on January 20th, 2017. But I think, secondly, Barack Obama is betting that Republicans will do as we've done in the past, which is nominate a candidate that is not willing to run as a strong conservative, that is not willing to paint in bold colors, that will be cowed by the mainstream media and the Washington cartel. And I think they're betting the next Republican president wouldn't have the courage to rescind these orders. I can tell you right now, in my view, these orders are not worth the paper they're printed on, because they are going away within the first hours after I'm sworn into office on January 20th.
Have you read his proposals yet?
I have seen some of the press outlines, but the full details are still coming out.
Okay. So I don't want to put any words into your mouth. This is the way I read it, and it may be very different than the way you read it, but I read it as expanded background checks and doctors reporting now to the FBI or ATF or somebody, I don't know. How do you argue to the average person that doesn't own a gun and lives in the major city, and they're like, you guys, you don't want expanded background checks, or you don't want people who are mentally ill around guns. How do you possibly argue that with people who aren't familiar with really what's going on?
Glenn, it's very easy. What Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton get wrong over and over again is, instead of focusing on the bad guys, instead of focusing on the criminals, instead of focusing on the terrorists, they focus on law-abiding citizens. So in the aftermath of the Paris terror attack, in the aftermath of the San Bernardino attack, President Obama holds a national TV conference. He doesn't once mention the words radical Islamic terrorism. He's not willing to be a commander-in-chief and actually defeat radical Islamic terrorism. But what is his immediate proposal? Go after the constitutional rights of law-abiding citizens. We don't beat the bad guys by taking away our guns. We beat the bad guys by using our guns to protect our homes and our families. And as president, I will direct the full military force of this country on defeating radical Islamic terrorism, on utterly destroying ISIS. And at the same time, we will have a president who protects and cherishes and values the Bill of Rights and constitutional rights of law-abiding citizens all across this country.
On Bill O'Reilly last night, Donald Trump said that he would, if for exchange of money, he would allow boots on the ground, American boots on the ground, and American forces to defend and fight a war for Saudi Arabia. It was kind of convoluted, but it was clear to me and everybody here who has listened to it, and we'll play it later on the program, that that's what he was saying. Tell me what you think about what's happening with Iran, with Russia, Syria, and now Saudi Arabia, and what is our involvement and how much responsibility do we have here?
Well, what is happening is all the direct consequence of the weakness and appeasement of 7 years of the Obama-Clinton foreign policy, and in particular Saudi Arabia's conflict. They are responding because they are neighbors with Iran, and Iran is led by theocratic zealots that have declared war on America. The Ayatollah Khamenei chants, death to Israel, death to America. And the situation in the Middle East is going to continue to get worse and worse as the Saudis and everyone else realize, and they're quite acutely aware of it, of the profound danger that a nuclear Iran poses not just to the Middle East but to the world. The answer is not for us to get involved in a land war involving Saudi Arabia. I think there has been far too much military adventurism in getting in the middle of Middle Eastern wars, but the answer is we need a commander-in-chief who does whatever is necessary to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. That's the problem, is $100 billion that the Obama administration wants to allow to flow to Iran, and their acquiring a nuclear weapons destabilizes and endangers both the region and America. And if I am president, Iran will not acquire a nuclear weapon, and they will understand, just as they did in 1981, when Iran released our hostages the day Ronald Reagan was sworn into office. That's the difference a strong and credible commander-in-chief can make, and that's what we need in the White House.
You are leading in the polls that show who is the commander-in-chief. Who do you see as commander-in-chief? You are the guy who is leading the polls by quite a wide margin, at least the last poll that I saw. What is the thing that you would want the American people and the armed forces to know? Your president, day number one, like you said with Iran, it was very clear that we were going to be very serious with Iran. What is the thing that you want the military and the rest of the world to know day number one?
Well, let me take that on two different levels. First of all, to the men and women serving in our armed forces. For 7 years, they've had a commander-in-chief who will not support them, who doesn't have their back, who undermines them, who weakens them. That will change in January 2017. Once again, our soldiers and sailors and airmen and Marines will have a commander-in-chief who stands by the fighting men and women of this country. And I cannot tell you how many servicemen and women across this country have said to me privately that they cannot wait for that moment
Will you take
when they
away
no longer have a commander-in-chief undermining their service for this country. But
will you take away those rules of engagement?
Yes, absolutely, yes. We are forcing our soldiers to fight with both arms tied behind their back. It is wrong. It is immoral. I believe, and what I intend for both our enemies and allies to understand from the first day, is that America is back. I believe in peace through strength. And ironically, when you have a strong and vigorous president and a capable and effective military conflict is much, much less likely. I mean, it's worth underscoring, in 8 years, the biggest country Reagan ever invaded was Grenada. And the reason is our enemies understood Reagan wasn't bluffing. He wasn't messing around. He would do whatever he needed to do to keep this country safe. Now, he wasn't interested in the Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton establishment Republican plan of getting involved in every Middle Eastern civil war and toppling governments and allowing radical Islamic terrorists to take it over. That's not the job of our military. What is the job of our military is to kill the terrorists before they kill us. And that focus, our friends will understand and our enemies will understand.
Senator Ted Cruz, who is now going to be visiting all 99 Iowa counties, is on the phone with us, and you can join his effort at tedcruz.org, tedcruz.org. I've got about 30 seconds. Do you want to make any comment on Donald Trump and any of the others that are questioning your religious background?
Well, listen, 2 weeks ago, just about every Republican candidate was attacking Donald Trump. Today, just about every Republican candidate is attacking me. I guess that indicates maybe something has changed in the race.
Ted, thank you very much. tedcruz.org. We'll talk to you again, Senator.